I don't think Brazil is easier or harder than anywhere else. What I do think is, I think Brazil has more traps. I have recently come to appreciate how powerful entrepreneurship can be for some people to really change their lives.
Hello and welcome to Brazil is Not for Beginners. Today my guest is Lucas Lima. Lucas is a partner at LASP Capital and a well-known angel investor. He was also a founder himself. Lucas, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We've talked about this for a while. I was supposed to be your first podcast, and unfortunately now I'm your third. Terribly disappointed. I think Abreu got you before I did, and somebody else, but I think I'm your first English language podcast.
Yes, exactly. I'm a bit shy in English, so let's see how this goes.
I've never known you to be shy in English, but we'll see how this goes. So like I said, there's two things I'd really love to chat with you about. One is your experience as an entrepreneur. Men's Market was an early startup here in Brazil, kind of in the early days of people trying startups. Obviously, Brazil's developed a large ecosystem, and I want to hear about your experience there. And then since deciding to exit from Men's Market, you've become a pretty prolific and desired angel investor. And so wanting to hear about your experience as an angel, how you've seen the Brazilian market evolve, lessons for founders, lessons for investors. But maybe we can, just to get started, tell us about Lucas. Where are you from?
Perfect.
How did you end up in this podcast?
So I'm from Rio originally, but I have been in São Paulo since I was 14. So I consider myself a Paulista, which is in the Brazilian context that's important.
Okay. Your team is in São Paulo, or your team is a Rio team?
My team is actually in Rio. It's called Fluminense.
Okay. As long as you're not a Flamengo fan, I think that's
but
the right.
I am a Paulista, and I went to university here in São Paulo. I studied at FGV.
Okay.
From 2007 to 2010, and then I started my professional career in private equity here in São Paulo. And I think it's that timing is important because around 2010, 11, 12ish, that was when the first seeds of the venture capital cycle were starting to blossom in Brazil.
Okay.
So if you look at the funds that are more active today, Kazakh, Monashis, they all came from that period. So if I'm not mistaken, Monashis was founded in 2005, Kazakh in 2010,
okay.
Valor around that region. So it was a time that people were starting to build businesses in Brazil. And this is important in my perspective, from my trajectory, because I was at a large private equity firm looking at infrastructure investments, toll roads and energy projects and very traditional, very solid companies. But I couldn't feel the entrepreneurial spark in those projects and what I was doing.
Okay.
And at the same time, you were starting to see this ecosystem arise. This angels, VCs, some Americans were coming to Brazil to invest.
Were these the people that graduated from FGV with you, or these were outsiders that you came across in private equity conversations? Who were these? How were you encountering these people? Because it sounds like you were at your day job doing interesting work, but feeling the spark was missing, and somehow meeting these people with this spark.
These were Americans, curiously, because I think, again, you got to go back to 2011. I think the US was still kind of hurting from the financial crisis, 2009, 10, and Brazil was booming back then.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of these Americans coming over and with ideas that they were seeing in the US, and they were, God bless them, but they were naively saying, let's do this in Brazil and coming. Yeah. And they were bringing investors, and I was watching them and seeing them, and I was younger than they were. They were post-MBA students, and I was still younger, but I was kind of awed by them. I was like, wow, these guys know what they're doing. I need to meet them. And then I started trying to meet them and trying to introduce myself, and that's when if these guys can do it, maybe I can do it as well.
Okay.
I'm not as experienced as they are. I'm not as frankly smart as they are, but I'm Brazilian. I have local contacts, maybe I should try to do something.
Was there a little bit of kind of seeing behind the facade as well as you got to know some of these people that like, I think sometimes you see people doing things and put them on a pedestal and then you meet them and realize that they're people as well, right? So,
Yeah.
And like, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody, but like sometimes you see the wizard behind the curtain, you're like, I could do that too.
Oh, there was a little bit of that, but I think mostly it was, the grass is always greener.
Okay.
Angle. So
Yeah.
I was there, doing spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations and board decks and committees and looking at these people who were building teams, hiring, getting an office, thinking about product, thinking about fundraising. And at the time, I still am, but I'm a bit anxious. So I was like, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta quit my job. So in 2012, I quit my job and leapt into my entrepreneurial journey.
So men's market.
Yes, which is, and it's interesting because, again, I was 23, so I was younger and less mature, and I would do things differently today, I think. But the idea for the company was, it wasn't born out of a problem necessarily. It was more of a business opportunity that we think existed.
Okay.
So back then, one of the most interesting Brazilian companies was a company called Natura, which is it's still quite large and quite successful. They sell cosmetics.
Yeah, I mean, very large.
Very large, it's a multinational company. They sell cosmetics, and they were basically catered to the female market, right? They were selling products for women, basically. 95% of what they sold was directly to women. Their main competitor was a company called Boticário, which is even more successful today, and similarly
focused on women.
100% focused on women.
Yeah.
And the more we looked at cosmetics, the more we saw like everyone's focused on women. And of course, there's a reason. I think women are larger consumers of cosmetic products. But at the time, we also thought that was a function of the channels that they were selling in. So Natura was selling in like these direct resellers, like Avon style direct resellers. And they were mostly women selling to women. So it's a very women to women channel. Boticário was with these small franquias, which is franchise shops, small shops.
Both, right? So, yeah.
Typically women selling to women as well. And then the rest of the market was in hair salons selling to women as well. And we thought, well, maybe the problem isn't the product or the consumer behavior. Maybe the problem was the channel. And if we can establish a direct consumer channel on the internet, which was new at the time, right? I mean, this was 15 years ago. Maybe that's the way we can get to the market for men. And it's a place where there will be less competition, room, opportunity for growth, and we can do exciting things. So that was what was behind.
It's funny you talk about this because that was also the time when I think you were seeing more products for men on store shelves in the U.S.
Yes, Harry's.
So
yeah.
So I remember I used to swim as a teenager and a child. Like I was on the high school swim team and stuff, and so would spend hours and hours in chlorine and would use body wash as opposed to soap. And came to Brazil and it was soap, and I would then go back and bring bottles of body wash with me because I couldn't get body wash here, and it was something that I was used to. And so like it's a thing, and now you really see it. Like there's a lot of men's cosmetics and beard grooming and all sorts. So I'm also curious how much you can always say I would do something different, but maybe you were also just ahead of the market in some respects, and
it could
kind
be.
of internet channel distribution as well, right? Like you're mentioning Harry's and you're mentioning some of these other guys that, or we could mention some of the players that are out there now that do this and distribute that way. But really, like the timing, I remember distinctly being in Brazil and not finding the products, also not looking terribly hard for them, so because I could bring them with me, but really interesting. So okay, so you started men's market. What were the early days like? What was the early team? Do you have co-founders?
I had a co-founder. My co-founder was much more experienced in the cosmetics world than I was. So he actually understood the products and he understood consumer behavior.
Were you developing your own products, or you
no,
were just
at first we were sourcing and just reselling them online. So okay. I mean, we were scrappy. We were doing it with as little money as possible, basically. And again, this is before the days of Shopify, so we were scrambling to get up our own website up and running, using the Brazilian National Post Office as the logistics distributor. and just buying and selling. And it was a lot of fun. I mean,
Okay.
the beginning is like everything's new, and every day you've been through this, that excitement of when you're still
Learning, yeah.
Yeah, and every day feels an improvement upon the previous day. So it's very interesting. And we had no team for a couple of months. It was just the two of us, and then we started getting comfortable enough to hire people. We hired a couple of.
Did you bootstrap initially, or you raised some outside
No.
capital, like friends and family?
Yeah, it was friends and family. We raised money from friends, family, and my former bosses at the private equity firm that I used to work at.
That was
So,
nice. Vote of confidence.
yes, which was important at the time, right? It was good validation, and we used that money for working capital, marketing, getting the initial website up and running, and it was a lot of fun. I think everyone that you talk to, or most people that you talk to, always remember, remember those days fondly at the beginning. And for me, it wasn't different.
Okay. What was like designing the product, finding customers? What was that all like?
So this is before Facebook was a real customer acquisition channel,
Okay.
or at least here in Brazil, right? Maybe it was in the US, but we were very focused on Google AdWords and email marketing.
Okay.
That was where we were spending our energy on, and trying to set up a website that was different enough from what people would expect to see, and we tried to be smart about sourcing because we didn't have our own products, so we wanted to have either exclusive things or things that you couldn't find elsewhere, or were harder to find elsewhere. So there was a lot of work on the sourcing. And as we got into the company around 2013, 14, then Facebook started appearing as a really important channel. And I think I won't say we were pioneers, but we were early into understanding the power of Facebook as a channel. And that was really exciting. Understanding how the campaigns worked, the ads, and then, I'm not sure if you remember, but people would pay for likes to your page. And
Yep.
it was a interesting moment in time.
Okay. And then you're doing this, and how long were you with the company for?
I was with the company for around 5.5 years, almost
Okay.
6.
That's a long journey.
It felt like 30 years.
Yeah, it can.
And we went through various phases. As I said, the initial fundraising was with family and friends. The second round of investments which was what today would be called a seed round, I guess.
Yeah.
Was from a Dutch investor who was a founder of Booking.com. He came to Brazil. He invested in some companies. We were one of them. And Series A was led by a U.S. fund called Green Oaks Capital, which is still a relevant fund today.
Mm-hmm.
They were investing in e-commerce companies around the world. They invested in Coupang in South Korea. We were in Brazil, and it was exciting. It was interesting. And over those 5 years, what happened was we clearly saw. I mean, in hindsight, it was clear that it was going to be hard to create a meaningful business with third-party brands. We needed to have our own proprietary products to sell, and we started to develop private label brands and started selling them. And as the business grew,
And that's a very different business.
it's a different business, and this is something I think I didn't appreciate at the time, which was this business had reasonable margin dynamics, but it had terrible working capital dynamics. So we would have to pay up front for a lot of the products we were buying private label to develop them. We didn't have the scale to pay them afterwards. And in Brazil, when a customer would buy something for you using his credit card on an e-commerce platform, they usually pay in installments, and you get the cash according to the installments paid, and you had to hold inventory. So it was it wasn't a great
Cash-heavy business.
It was, and while we were in our, I would say, most successful phase of our company from a top line and growth perspective, Brazil, the tide had turned, and Brazil was going through a very hard macro phase. So interest rates went from, I don't know, 6 to 15.
Okay.
And when you're a working capital heavy business in an environment where interest rates shoot up, a lot of our products were imported and the effects shot up. We were in a vulnerable spot around the 2015-ish, 2016, and that was tough. That was tough because it was also at a time when a lot of the early e-commerce companies from the first phase of VC, none of them really worked.
Okay.
And so capital disappeared. And I remember going to the US to fundraise in 2016 and having 30 meetings, 40 meetings, and no one was interested. And
Okay.
so that was humbling.
So was it the fundraising? What was it that kind of you ended up winding down, right? Or
We
you
ended up selling the company.
You sold
yeah.
the company, right? So you sold the company in the end. But what kind of led to that decision to do it? So it was a confluence of these factors. You were trying to raise, you couldn't raise. You guys were burned out after 5.5 years.
Yeah, it was a confluence of various factors. So there were some co-founder misunderstandings or disagreements. One of the founders left. It was, I think, a realization from my side that the market wasn't as big as I thought or hoped it was.
Yeah.
The
It looks nice on a piece of paper, right?
It looks great, but in reality, it's
Yeah.
there's a reason those big brands were selling to men, and I was naive at the time, and the business. I think this is something that people overlook sometimes, but the actual business model characteristics weren't great. It's
Yeah.
competitive. The working capital dynamics weren't good. The customer acquisition dynamics weren't good. We thought at the time that value came from repeat buyers, and I still think that's the case. But we thought that repeat purchasing behavior came from selling a product that needs to be bought frequently. So I'll sell shampoo, you use shampoo. That's not the case, I think. I think repeat buyers coming from having something that's new all the time, and you show them something that's new and they come back to buy the new thing, which is not usually the case with grooming products, especially for men.
Interesting. I used the same body wash for the last 15 years.
True, but you might buy it in different places because you don't care where you buy it.
No, I buy the brand.
Yeah,
Right?
you buy the brand,
Yeah.
exactly. So we were in a pickle in 2016, and this is something that in the Brazil is a tough place to do business. Winding down a business in Brazil is hard.
Yeah.
You never want to be in a position where you have to wind down a company without the necessary capital.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a.
How big were you guys at this point? Like how many employees?
We were 60 employees,
Okay.
doing around, let's say, $600,000 a month in revenue. Okay, so that was around.
Sizable business, yeah.
So I had a number in my mind, which is like if our cash balance ever goes below this, I'm calling it quits, closing the company, because this is what I need to shut the company down. And when we started getting close to that, I started having discussions with potential buyers. The two big original companies that I discussed in the beginning, Natura and Boticário, and some smaller players. And we ended up selling the company in December 16.
Okay.
Which was, and it wasn't, it wasn't zero, but it was below the pref stack. So in the end, I think I thought at the time I thought it was a horrible outcome. In retrospect, I thought it's fine. It's part of doing business, and there was no. I didn't make any money, but I had peace of mind afterwards. There was no headaches, no problems.
That's worth a lot of money.
It's worth it. This is what I realize now that maybe I didn't appreciate back in the day, and we were. I mean, in a not too distant universe, it could have been a nightmare if we hadn't managed to sell. 60 people and customers, employees, and suppliers, and debt. It's complicated.
What was the decision like for you? How did you manage it when you kind of decided this? How did you share it with the team, with the investors? Like, what was that process like?
It was very tough because you never know if the sale is going to go through, right? And the last thing you want is to tell your team. They either get excited about it or they get disengaged with the news, and then it doesn't go through. So what I tried to do was postpone the communication as much as possible, but that's also very hard because people aren't stupid. They see that you're going around.
People are coming in.
They realize there's something going on, and so what I did at the time was I shared the news with my two closest partners, and asked, they helped in the negotiation, they helped in the discussions, and I tried to keep it to myself for as long as possible, which I don't think I would do again. I think I think it would have been better if I had been more transparent with the team back then.
Okay.
And
Go ahead, please.
oh, and it's a tough decision because you know at the same time it's like you got a mission, you got to do it, you got to get the deal done, but then you still have to run the company, right? Like you still have problems in sales and marketing, and the last thing you need is for everything to go wrong right before you sell. So they were a complicated couple of months, maybe 3 months. It wasn't that long, but it felt very long.
Yeah, well, 10 of the 30 years, right? At least.
Exactly.
So you said, hindsight's 2020, different things that you would do now. What do you take from the experience, and what are maybe some of the things that you would do differently in terms of building and kind of going through? So you mentioned maybe you would have told the team earlier on what was going on and would have informed them. What else do you take from the experience of running the business as well as the wind down that you would share, that you would do differently, or that maybe a better way to position, because I want to talk to you about your angel investing, that you use now as guidance as you give to other people that you invest in?
I think what I would do differently, and what I actually tell people these days, is to put less weight on yourself.
Yeah.
I put a lot of weight on my back, myself, on the decision how it's not working, and people trusted me, and people gave me capital, and everybody knows where they're getting into. If you were transparent at the start with the investor, they know the risks. Yeah. So sometimes I see founders who are in that tough situation, and my reaction is always to try to take the weight off your back. It's not on you.
Yeah.
You did your best. What else could you do?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I would be able to do it if I did it again, but I would try to take it more lightly.
Yeah. It's hard if you're all in, you have to be all in, right?
And it is because you're not all in professionally. You're also all in from your identity, right? You are an entrepreneur. You consider yourself an entrepreneur.
And this company, to some
degree.
People
talk to you because of your experience as an entrepreneur. And when that unravels, like, oh God, what am I now? But that's too much weight. I don't think we need to put that weight upon ourselves. So that's what I would do differently. I would try, and I would try to get help as well. For example, today I have there's a psychologist or a shrink, I don't know how you say it in English, that I go to every week. Yeah. Which is great, and I did not have that at the time. If I had someone actually helping me think through this, I think it would have been much easier.
Okay, well, that's a nice transition as well when we talk about help to you're an active angel investor, as I said. So I'd be interested in hearing a little bit of the middle of how you went from men's market to angel investing. Did you start back then? How did you do that? But you also provide some of that help yourself. And one of the things that I see in the Sao Paulo ecosystem, in my experience, was actually like the community is pretty welcoming and tries to be pretty helpful. I mean, obviously it's not the same thing as having your own psychologist, but if you find people that are at similar stages, going through similar challenges, at least you have somebody to talk to about it. And you were early on, right? You were part of that early phase, but I'd be interested in kind of how you think about giving that advice to people now, and how your role is shaped by that, and how you think about yourself as an angel like that. But maybe before that, how did you get started as an angel investor? So
remember that I told you that the first contacts I had with the entrepreneurial world were with these Americans coming to Brazil.
Okay.
And I met a guy in 2012 called Daniel Hadkoff, who I introduced you actually.
Yeah, I like Daniel. Smart guy. Maybe we'll get him on this one time.
That'd be good.
You keep telling me to get him on, so we'll hopefully do it.
And Daniel was starting a cell phone insurance company. Yeah. And I said, he's smarter than I am. He's more experienced than I am. Mm-hmm. He's more, he's in the business world, like he's more savvy than I am. Like, I want to be involved. Okay. So I found a way to invest a bit in his company. He was raising a round at the time, his first round, with a fund called Flybridge from Boston. Yep. And Kazakh from Sao Paulo. And I was an early investor there.
Wiggled your way in.
And when he started his company, he had this big office and he didn't have enough people to fill it up with. So he and some other entrepreneurs got together and started somewhat of a co-working space before that was a thing. And so my office was there, and then I was just seeing these people coming in and out with ideas, and I started getting excited about other people's ideas, and started making these small investments once in a while while I was running my business, right? So it was nothing too much. So that's how I got started. And I was lucky enough that the first 3 investments that I made were companies that the 3 of them are still alive today.
Okay.
And to different degrees, but the 3 of them thrived.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of the beginner's luck thing, Maybe
say, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I think it's good and bad. It's good because if that hadn't been the case, I would have not done anymore.
Yeah.
But it's also bad because it just anchors my expectation towards something that's maybe not natural.
Yeah.
But the fact is that those first 3 companies, maybe because of the cohort they were in, maybe because of the founder line, for whatever reason, they were companies that did really well, and that kind of funded or helped fund my investments from them. So starting from 2018, more or less, or 19, I started picking up the pace because I think the ecosystem was more mature, more people were coming in to start companies.
You'd recovered from your exit a little bit.
I was in less pain, and that's what I've been doing since then.
Did you miss, was there a you needed to get away from the ecosystem for a little while period, and then you kind of missed it type?
Yeah, there was, because between after we sold the company, I went to work for a hedge fund here in São Paulo, which was a bit back to basic, back to what I was doing before, and it was very intellectually exciting, but there wasn't the entrepreneurial energy that I seek, that I like, that I want to see in others. So after some time, I got to get back to this world somehow. Yeah, and that's how I enjoy investing. Is the way I found my way to be close.
Yeah, I hear you, because I don't have the energy to do it again, at least yet. But miss it, and I think this podcast is one of the ways I try to stay a little bit close to it, right? Which is one of the things, and I don't know, maybe you let me in on some of your good deals when you find good flow. Although you're also very, very transparent about the stage of people that you're investing in. When you look at startups, talk a little bit about your process. So actually, maybe taking a step back, how many angel investments have you done? I don't know if you have a number.
I've done around 110.
Okay.
Since 2012, right? So it's not a short period of time. Of those, around 60 I've done in the current format, which is in partnership with Doug, my partner.
Right. With LASP Capital.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So, which is not just a venture capital fund. We
do public equity investments as well, and we have a very broad view of the investing world. And today what we do is listed companies basically in the US and early stage companies basically in Brazil.
Okay. And what is the process that you guys have when you look at companies, right? Is there a process, or is it a little bit more depends on the situation? Do you look at the founder? Do you look at the problem? Do you look at the market? Are there other things that you look at? Is there a sourcing process that you have, and then how do you consider and evaluate?
I would say there's less of a process than you would think. Okay. There's a pattern. Maybe pattern is a better word than process. So the usual pattern is this: someone introduces me to a founder. Usually the person who introduces me to a founder is a founder themselves. Okay. So someone I invested in says, hey, I have a friend, or I met this person and I thought I was really intrigued by what they were doing. I think you could help, or I think you could get involved, right? That's usually how it starts. And I would have a first conversation with that person, usually in person, and then hear the story. What's the story? What are you doing? What are you thinking about? What's going on? What are your motivate? Like, why are you motivated to do this? And then in that conversation, which is unstructured, some things emerge, from the motivation, from the type of founder, the type of problem, their vision. I mean, it's hard. It's so early. It's hard to talk about a vision, but what they want to build. And if I'm excited enough, I said, "Oh, you need to beat Doug," because Doug is, the smartest person I know,
Okay.
best investor I know, everything. So you got to beat Doug. I usually filter, and then they talk to Doug, and if Doug also feels something special, and then we say we want to get involved.
Okay.
Now, we want to get involved can mean different things, because it can be a company that is raising, it can be a very sophisticated founder that worked at Nubank and then went to HBS and knows everything about the VC world and has a term sheet from Benchmark, and then getting involved means something.
Right.
And it could, at the other end of the spectrum, it could be a founder that was either very young or in a world outside of the VC ecosystem.
Yeah.
And doesn't really have the connections, doesn't really have the context, and doesn't really understand how this works. And then getting involved can mean something very different. We don't have a preference. I mean, there's successes and failures in all sides and across the spectrum. But we just appreciate that it means different things.
Okay.
For some, it can be just as a sounding board for what they're discussing with the VCs, and for the others, it can mean introducing them to the VCs, helping them craft the narrative, helping them think through the deck, helping them think of what to say, what not to say, who to talk to, when to talk to them, and then we, I would say it's evenly split among that spectrum. So when we do get involved, we try to be as helpful as we can.
Yeah.
And there's a limit to how helpful we can be, right? Because we're not the entrepreneurs, and we don't want to be the entrepreneurs. We always want to be the back seat in some way or another, and as a sounding board, and then we invest. So that's the process, if you want to call it.
Okay. What is so I never met Doug. I never got to that stage. We became friends and you helped me anyway. But what are the early signals and the red flags that you kind of, what things really capture you? Like, is it just a structured thinking? Is it somebody being an expert on an industry? Is it an innovative approach? Like, what are the things that tend to excite you, and what are the things that kind of red flags? This seems. We were talking the other day. There's too many people leaving good jobs. You feel like the market might be getting a little overheated now. I don't know if you still feel that way, or if I paraphrase it right. But what are some of the things that are positive signals and negative signals that you tend to see?
I think the most positive signal is the crystal clear thinking about what they're doing.
Okay.
Someone can really explain to you what they're doing in a simple, concise way. Every time I see something, like, wow, let's dig in. And the biggest, or maybe not the biggest, but one of the yellow flags is, someone who can't really tell you what they're doing or why they're doing it in a clear way. And that usually turns me off to a certain extent. At the earliest stages, it's more of a, does this person have a reason to understand the problem they're trying to solve, or is the person just chasing a problem? So it varies from stage, from types of founders. The flags the things I would try to flag in a founder who's, let's say, 38 and has worked at, let's say, JP Morgan for 10 years and is doing something in banking, is very different from the things I would try to flag in a founder who's 22 and who's fresh off college and wants to start something big. So I try to calibrate my approach to the specific situations, because I think there is no one size fits all. It's one of the things I like about this whole investing, and it's there's no real process. It's very artisanal. I'm not sure if that's even a word, but it's it's very you can't.
Bespoke.
It's bespoke, it's tailor-made. You have to, every situation requires a different angle and a different approach. Every founder requires and when you were a founder, you would require, I imagine, one type of relationship with an investor or potential investor. Someone else who had a different background will require something totally opposite. And I like that.
So I really liked the comment that you made about kind of what right does somebody have to solve this problem versus somebody chasing a problem. And I think that there's a lot of problems that are out there that seem like they should be solved. And to some degree, I'd put where I was playing in income protection for low-income people as a kind of an obvious problem that makes a lot of sense. Nobody's cracked it yet, and that's part of the challenge. And so, are there? You always see these lists of like the 10 ideas that everybody thinks is a good idea and no, isn't. Do you have thoughts on that? Is there advice you give to certain founders when you hear are there certain problems that you hear coming up regularly? Like, oh, I want to build a company that does this, that like, this is what you need to have as a background for dealing with something like that. Just how do you consider that element of a problem, problems that people continue to chase?
Well, let's take an example that's valid or that's relevant in Brazil, for example, which is credit, right?
Yeah,
Brazil,
so many credit companies.
Brazil is, there's a lack of capital in the system.
Yeah.
So anyone that can provide a credit solution usually can have scale and can get good economics, it can get good output, it usually works. Mm-hmm. The problem is it's very hard to make money because it is very competitive. There's a lot of credit problems. So credit is or ideas that revolve around the credit angle are very common.
Yeah. And
to your point about what type of person has the right, quote unquote, to address something credit, I usually like people who have felt the pain of credit in this specific example.
Okay.
So someone who's never felt the pain of dealing with credit losses, dealing with fraud, dealing with someone trying to steal your money, I think they don't really understand what credit really is.
Yeah.
But if someone comes to me and says, no, I've been working in, let's say, this big food distributor, and they sell in installments, and I know that the clients don't pay, and I know what we have to do to chase them down, and I know, and I have this idea to do something slightly different with this type of, this is collateral, like that's something, I would say that person has the right, or doesn't mean it's gonna work, right?
Right.
But
he has the right to play
that gets
in
me
that space.
more excited than someone saying, micro lending worked in India, Brazil, pretty similar to India. Micro lending is going to work in Brazil. Let's come to Brazil and set this up here. Yeah, I mean, that could work, right? I mean, that doesn't mean that won't work, but it just gets me less excited.
And yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that as well in terms of tropicalizing something to the right context and understanding. And I had somebody on from ID Wall a few weeks ago, or a few episodes ago rather, and they were talking about identity fraud and collections and payment fraud, and just if you haven't been beaten up, then you haven't worked in fraud, right? Like you're going to lose a lot of the time, and it's just trying to limit the losses. And so if you haven't lived that, then you're not going to understand it when it happens, and you're gonna maybe take it the wrong way. I don't know. Anyway, I liked your take on that. That was really interesting. How was your experience at Men's Market and as an entrepreneur shaped how you act as an angel?
I think the most important thing is that I truly understand, or I think I truly understand, how lonely and difficult the job can be sometimes of a founder, and how most founders are always either wearing some type of mask or forcing themselves to wear some type of mask when they deal with employees, with co-founders, with investors, with suppliers. And I think from having been there, I can relate. He said, look, with me, I get what you're doing. I understand that, but with me, like, let me know what's going on.
Yeah.
And what's getting to you? Like, what's making you suffer? And there's usually something that's making them suffer.
Yeah, you've said that to me. Startup is suffering.
And I think that experience has helped me. And I don't connect with everyone, right? There's some. It's not. In the end, it's personal connections, and it's hard to connect with everyone. But with some of the people who I do connect to, I think it's a very powerful connection, and I think there's a level of trust from having been through some of those challenges that having suffered yourself, it's easier to help someone else's suffering or to help alleviate someone else's suffering. And I think it's more legitimate as well. So if I had my whole career as an investor, it would be the things I mean, I could say the same things, but they would be less legitimate, I think.
Yeah, understood. What do entrepreneurs overlook about how difficult it is to build here? So you talked about some of the suffering. What are some of the points of suffering that people don't expect or overlook that's going to be hard here? And obviously there's the obvious ones, right? The bureaucracy of Brazil. Talked about credit collection, getting paid.
Yeah.
What are some of the things?
Talking specifically about Brazil, because some of the things are global, right? Like the challenges of building a business and how competitive it is. But let's try to focus on some of the things people overlook about building a company in Brazil specifically, which I think is interesting. I think people overlook how business models and working capital dynamics affect the outcome of their business.
Okay.
So even if you have a great idea, even if there's product market fit, if you can't get the working capital dynamics right, it's either not going to work or it will work and you will end up owning 0.5% of your company because you diluted yourself so much.
Cash is king.
More in Brazil than outside because everyone pays in installments. Interest rates here are 15% a year. There's no corporate debt here for startups. People, it's just hard. It's just hard. So a lot of the companies I think that have been successful have had great working capital dynamics.
Yeah.
Nubank was the best case. It's the credit card capital cycle here is
different than everywhere else.
Different than everywhere else. Quintandar is a great example as well. They get the rent money up front and then they pay the landlords. So it's anytime you see something that's successful here, if you dig in a bit, you say, that's interesting. That's smart. That's that's a smart way to. So I think people overlook this. The second thing I think people overlook is the size of the consumer markets here, which are not as big as they are in the US. And I saw this company doing, something for someone in the US, let's bring it to Brazil. I get it, but maybe the consumer market in Brooklyn, in New York, is larger than the whole Brazilian market.
Yeah, I had my old boss on from Bain, and the way they talk about it and from a private equity perspective, I've said this many times, but Brazil is Canada, right? Like Brazil is not the US. There's 200 million people, but the size of the market
that's a good way
that population of people that make $60,000 a year, whatever the number is the size of Canada. You have the rest of the country as well, which is a potential market, and some of that will come in, but the main market is Canada.
Yeah.
And so, really interesting part. I don't mean to stop you from the other one.
No, and I think every country has its own traits and characteristics, and I don't think, to be honest, I don't think Brazil is easier or harder than anywhere else, right? What I do think is, I think Brazil has more traps.
Okay.
And there are some holes you can fall into that are like, oh my God.
Yeah, they're traps and you don't see them as well either because somebody else said this to me. Brazil is so welcoming. You're like, oh, it's so nice. It's so comfortable. I could make this work. And then you get here and then you get knocked on the head.
Exactly. And it's less straightforward.
Yeah.
So I think the US is more straightforward, but there's more competition. Brazil has more traps. And I think some entrepreneurs fall into these traps and they don't know what hit them.
Yeah.
And like how you issue invoices, not a fiscal, which should be easiest thing in the world. Oh, that can be a trap.
Yeah.
Because that affects how you pay taxes. That affects when you get your money. It can be a nightmare. And people
where your SEGI is, right?
Some basic things, or in how you hire or fire people if they are PJ or CLT, which is if you hire them as an employee or as a contractor, and then all of a sudden you get the unions. I mean, what unions? I'm a startup, So like it has some more traps.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I like that term for traps. That's a good one. Talk about you're an investor, right? We've talked about some of the advice that you give. How should founders, and particularly Brazilian founders, think about kind of investor relations and this idea of, you talked about the mask that they wear, which always makes me think of the Mask movie and Ben Stein, which somebody else brought up the other day that I really loved and made me laugh. But what should they think about kind of, maybe even taking a step back before the investor relations, raising money and the implications that come with raising money. So maybe let's start with that, and then we can talk about investor relations before that, or after that, sorry.
Raising money is a necessity in most cases, right?
Yeah.
Most companies, if they have not raised money, the founders cannot get started.
Right.
This might be changing now.
Well, there's lifestyle businesses and startups, right?
But
And sometimes I think sometimes people conflate lifestyle businesses with startups.
Exactly. I think what people sometimes overlook is that when you raise money, there is an implicit agreement with, when you raise money in the VC world, right?
Yeah.
Which is different if you raise money in the mid-market private equity world. But when you raise money in the VC environment, I think people overlook, or they don't notice the importance of there's this implicit agreement between founders and investors.
Yeah.
That at every turn or at every decision making or every point of decision, you would choose the path of highest growth.
Okay.
Even if that's not what the founder thinks should be done from his personal perspective. So no, I want a more profitable company, but there's this implicit agreement, like if you take my money, every time you get the chance, we'll go for the path of highest growth, highest growth, highest growth, because
Even if it's riskier.
even if it's risky, because from the VC's perspective of a portfolio approach, he doesn't, or they don't really mind that it's riskier. What they want is that you're searching for the highest potential return. And from a founder's perspective, where they have one portfolio company,
Yeah.
maybe that math isn't great for them.
Yeah. It's a very different math.
And when people don't realize that this implicit agreement has been made, that can lead to challenges in investor relations. And I have seen burnouts, I have seen endless discussions just based on that thought. So either you should acknowledge that and go down that path, or upfront state that you are not in agreement with that, or that you will, and then you have to manage it differently.
Right. Well, you raise a different type of capital or from a different
Or
type
you
of
raise a
investor.
different type of capital.
Right. And how should founders think about that in their interaction with their investors? So in challenging moments, in these points, you said you wish you'd had help, which is, I think you were talking about a different type of help, but how should founders think about investors as being that help as well?
I mean, my answer is the worst possible answer, because it depends.
Yeah, okay. You're an economist at the end of the day, so.
It depends on the type of investor, it depends on the type of founder, it depends on the type of company, on the situation.
Yeah.
But what I would say is most relationships with investors, they should be managed by the founders. I think in many cases, founders, they leave the relationships to they let it be passive. You reach out, you call. I think they need to be managed.
Okay.
And what I mean by manage is the founder should set the right expectations for what he expects from the investors, what he expects to deliver to the investors, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, so that when something happens and when there's when there's some problem or some challenge, that they can be addressed. I think it's common for example, for investors to talk to the entrepreneurs only in the board meetings. But then you're only talking to the entrepreneur with other people around. So I think it's the founder's job to manage the investors. And investors need to be managed differently. An angel investor should be managed in a different way than someone who could potentially lead your next Series B or your Series C. And a lot of people, I don't know if they appreciate that.
Yeah.
Or the subtleness of that. I would say how you react, or not how open, but how vulnerable you are to someone who might lead your Series B, C, and D should be different from someone who invested in your company back in the day and who's
Know a friend.
A friend and cheering for your success. They have no vested. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to invest $20 million in your company.
Yeah.
I think you need to know how to actively manage that.
Understood. And from an investor standpoint, and maybe it ties to this and just doing a good job of this managing, what earns founder trust for you, and what erodes it?
I think founder trust comes from being available and being direct.
The founder being available to you, or you're saying as an investor. So I'll ask about the investor,
right.
how you earn investor trust, how you earn trust as an investor. But I'm interested in what from your perspective, earns you more trust in that founder versus erodes your trust in that founder?
I think I start really trusting a founder when I believe they're telling me they're not hiding anything.
Okay.
And they are being vulnerable.
Okay.
That's when I think the trust starts to build. Some people.
So lessons are know a founder that you already invested in and be vulnerable with you. Those are the two. That's how you get on Lucas's good side, it sounds like. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, I mean, I don't. It's not that I want people to be vulnerable with me. It's just that I think I can help them more when they are.
Yeah, of course.
Like if they, this is. Sometimes sometimes you see someone is off.
Yeah.
And they can't really share with. They could just say, "Oh, I can't stand my head of marketing anymore." Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I've been through that.
Yeah.
Maybe we can discuss that. Maybe
Yeah.
I saw this work, this didn't work, and maybe I can be more helpful if they just say it.
Yeah. And then I'm assuming the opposite is what erodes the trust, is just them being opaque and hiding things. Yeah. Nobody likes surprises, right? Like, and I thought it was interesting your point there about the board meeting. Like, I always learned, and maybe that's just kind of the consulting world, like, as much as possible, the board meeting should be a foregone conclusion, right? Like, you've spoken to everybody, you've aligned everything before you get into the room. There's a lot of active management going into the relationships. All of the work happens before the actual board meeting. And yeah, there's discussion and everything else, but to walk into a board meeting not having spoken to people beforehand sounds very strange to me.
Well, board meetings are interesting. I've never been in a board meeting of a large company, right? So I don't know how the board meeting at Visa or Meta works, but most startup board meetings are a waste of time, in my opinion. Because I would much rather the founder just do what you're doing. Don't, because sometimes I have to stop for 3 weeks
to prepare a board deck.
Prepare the deck. It just.
It's helpful if it helps them align on the vision.
If it helps them, it's helpful. If not, it can be a waste of time. I think it's sometimes I would, if I had my way, if I was leading rounds, which I'm not, but I would say just send the updates. If I have questions, I'll ask you. If you have questions, you ask me, and we can discuss. We do a structured board meeting at the early stages. I usually think it's not helpful.
Yeah, understood. And now to your other question on the investor side. So what insights would you share with investors? Maybe we can start with angels. So new angels, like what are mistakes that you see, particularly new angels, but I mean old angels as well, making when they invest in startups?
I think the most common mistake from the angel investing part is a lot of people usually decide to be angels after some sort of liquidity event. So, I have some money.
I want to diversify. It sounds like fun.
And then they spend it all too quickly. And then they have nothing else to invest in.
Yeah.
And so they're at the mercy of what happened with that initial batch of companies. The other mistake is making sizing decisions. At the beginning, you don't really know what's going to work or not. So I would say just pick a size, a check size, whatever it is, and just use that.
Okay.
If you try to be too cute, invest more here, because I think that's usually a recipe for problems. Because you just don't know. There's so much randomness in the system that you just don't know. And the mistake I think that loses founders' trust, apart from not being available when they need it, is a lot of angels usually have been successful in some aspect of their business life, be it as a founder themselves, as an executive at a large company. And they usually come with a network that they say they will use to help the founder. So I know everyone, let's use your case, for example. I want to invest in your insurance startup because I came from insurance and I know all the brokers. Yeah, that's great. But that's only great if you are willing to use those connections to help the founder. Yeah. Because what sometimes happens is these angels, they oversell who they know or whatever. It's not that they oversell that they know. It's just they say, I'm so close to such and such, and when the founders need them to call such and such, I'm not gonna waste this contact here, and that's a bummer,
Yeah, that's disappointing.
So I think that's very disappointing. I think one of the investors I respect the most here in Brazil is a German guy called Florian at Canary.
Yeah.
and I've never told him this, but I think his best characteristics is that he will, if he invests in you and he knows someone, he'll connect you.
Okay.
He'll try to be helpful. He doesn't judge. No, I'm only gonna make the connection to someone who's doing well. No. Like if he's backing you, he's gonna make that connection and try to make it work. And I think that's very powerful. And I think a lot of angel investors, they don't realize that. I don't wanna waste this relationship with that company. That's the wrong approach.
Okay. Yeah, especially when that company's in the position that it actually needs the help.
Exactly.
And then that gets around to the other people that might potentially be angel investees, right?
Yeah.
Because Lucas didn't help me, or whoever didn't help me. We talked a lot about coming into Brazil and investing. So what do international investors kind of misunderstand about the Brazilian startup ecosystem? Let's start with that one.
I think that, and when I think about international investors, I would say my relationship has mostly been with American and European investors. I've never really had close relationships with Chinese investors or Middle Eastern investors, so I can't really speak for that angle. I think what most Americans and Europeans miss about Brazil is how different it is.
Okay.
So how the credit dynamics are different, how the rules are different, and people just assume that everyone's paying with a Visa credit card, it must be the same. No, it's not the same. Everyone is doing Brazil is very different, and I've seen a lot of American investors invest in a company,
Mm-hmm.
and then a year and a half into their investment, they say, "Oh, now I understand what the company really does."
Okay.
Because of how different it is.
I think that when you come to Brazil and you actually start engaging in the economy, you realize the nuances and how it's different from the markets that maybe you were comfortable with, right? So
No, and some basic things. For example, in the US, the domains that people want are .com.
yeah,
In Brazil, .com.br. That's usually a larger. It's hard for people to understand that. And
I've been liking .com.vc, com você, which is with you, right? Like, I like that one for anything that's personal, for like a consumer brand.
and then taxes.
Yeah.
I think American investors are shocked that startups have to pay taxes even though they're losing money. Oh, you do? You have to pay tax on revenue here. Like, what? Tax on revenue? Like my money? So these things are always a challenge.
Okay. Thinking from an international investor side, what are some of the unique opportunities that you think maybe outsiders underestimate here in Brazil? So you talked about credit as one that's maybe overestimated, and that everybody sees credit as an opportunity, both Brazilians and foreigners. What are some of the opportunities that you think are underestimated or underappreciated by people from abroad?
I wouldn't say credit is overestimated. I think people overestimate how
Easy it will
easy
be.
it would be.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think it
is a big problem.
It is a huge problem, a huge opportunity, and a lot of the profit pool in Brazil ends up going to credit. I firmly believe that. I also think there's a really large opportunity with AI plus WhatsApp.
Okay.
I think Brazilians use WhatsApp in a way that it's difficult for the average American to understand.
Yes.
The average American would guess Brazilians use WhatsApp as a communication tool or as a messaging tool. And I think in reality, Brazilians use WhatsApp as their personal operating systems.
Yep.
So it's difficult to understand how that works. But in that plus AI,
Yeah.
it's one of those things. So
It's a terrible operating system for you.
but if you were to guess, for example, where would the next big biotech company come from?
Mm-hmm.
I would say in all likelihood from Boston or from California.
Yep.
If you were to guess where the next new defense company would come from, in all likelihood from somewhere around Virginia, the Pentagon. And if you take that, where would the big AI plus WhatsApp, that's going to come from Brazil.
Okay.
So I think if that is something, that's the opportunity I think that these Brazilian companies have of being the first, being the best, and going global.
Okay.
So I'm actually really excited about the things I'm seeing. There are challenges. It's hard to differentiate yourself. You're dependent on Meta. So there are challenges, and I don't want to I don't want to not consider the challenges, but I think that's where I'm excited about something special being born in Brazil that you might hear about 5 years from now in a trip to India. Oh, I know that company. That's from São Paulo. I think
Okay.
I'm excited about that.
That's nice. One of my questions is what keeps you excited about kind of continuing to invest in Brazil, and it sounds like it's that innovation that you have here and that idea of kind of big ideas spreading from here. I don't know if that's what it is, or what keeps you active as an angel.
I think that's definitely something to see people building and those ideas. And I have recently been very excited, or I've come to appreciate how powerful entrepreneurship can be for some people to really change their lives. I think that the first wave of entrepreneurship in Brazil, and I don't want to generalize, but this is just from my perspective, the things I saw. Most of the first wave of entrepreneurs in Brazil were people whose lives did not necessarily need to be changed because they were good.
Yeah.
These were people that had been to the US to study, to Stanford, they worked at McKinsey, they worked at BCG, they worked at Goldman, and they wanted...
A lot of them were gringos.
And they wanted to be entrepreneurs as a way to express their views on the world, and that's great, that's amazing, I love tobacco.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to see people from different regions of Brazil, people who did not go to the correct schools, people who had never been to the US, people who didn't understand that they could use this as a ticket out of their region or their income level, and they're using it, but they're smart, they can code, and with AI they can leverage themselves, and these people are changing their lives.
Okay.
And I'm excited about that. I don't think it's necessarily these are bad entrepreneurs or worse entrepreneurs. I think it's hard for everyone, and the odds are against you in all cases. But I'm excited about meeting these people because I see the impact that it can have. Which previously, if you really wanted to have that impact, you would have to get a normal job, right? You would have to go to work for a bank or for a consulting company or a big corporation. And so I'm excited. That's what keeps me, I would say, as of today, 2025.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me excited about continuing to invest.
So that sounds like a different type of entrepreneur than who you normally would meet. So how are you, I asked you the sourcing question before, how are you meeting these kind of less traditional entrepreneurs?
I'm trying to go to the sources. So every 3 months I go to a university in a city called São José dos Campos here in Brazil, try to meet students, what they're hearing, what they're doing. I invested in a couple, and then they introduce me to their friends, and then the cycle repeats itself in a different world. Okay. So it's more of the same, but in a different world. And the hope is that these worlds will meet, right? There's no reason for them to be different. But I'm just...
The world is getting, Brazil is getting smaller, right? We had devs in Natal and in Porto Alegre, right?
Yeah.
So, cool. As we head to the end here, I always like to ask my guests, the name of the show is Brazil is Not for Beginners. And you said before, Brazil is not necessarily harder or easier than any other place, but what does the expression mean to you?
I think that's a really good expression. I'm Brazilian. I love Brazil, and I appreciate that it's not for beginners, but I also think it's not that hard. It's not. I mean, imagine building a company in a country like Pakistan, or a country with different alphabet, different logic, different rules, different legal system. Brazil is not for beginners, but a lot of people speak English here. The judicial system and the government system is based on the American system. So there's a lot of things you can understand.
Yeah, it's funny, and it's not for me to express what I think it means, and I don't necessarily know that I fully have it formed, but I really liked your comment about traps. And I had Eduardo Zilberberg on a few weeks ago, and he also mentioned this idea of the familiarity maybe being the challenge, right? So it's almost because it's closer, that makes it challenging, right? Because it's like people kind of speak enough English, the system seems close enough, it's welcoming, it lets you believe that it's the same, and then it catches you in the trap.
Yeah, that's good.
So anyway, I don't mean to direct or change what you mean it says, but
that's actually good. That's really good.
Okay, cool. And then I also always like to ask if there's an expression or a habit that you find really Brazilian, or you really like, or when you travel abroad, your American friends don't understand. Like, why do you do that?
What I would say is there's a saying, you know what the difference between Brazilians and Americans?
No.
If you're at a party, the Americans, they leave without saying goodbye.
Okay.
But the Brazilians, they say goodbye and they don't leave.
Okay.
They say goodbye 5 times. They
5
chat.
times.
And they,
Saideira.
Exactly.
You have to sit back down and have another
Exactly.
beer.
Yeah, I think that's.
I love it.
And the other thing is, I had lunch the other day with a friend, a business lunch.
Mhm.
It was myself, this Brazilian friend, and an American friend, Doug.
Okay.
And the Brazilian friend said, "No, we can have lunch, but I'm really rushed today, so we got to do it quickly, and I don't have time." And we had a 2-hour lunch.
That was a quick one.
That was a quick lunch.
Excellent. Lucas, this was awesome. I really loved the conversation. Really just great insights on your experience being a founder, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoy.